The figure in the corner. When I was younger, I went on a trip with my elementary school to a well-known camp. I didn't have many friends, so I ended up being placed in a cabin with other kids I didn't know well. It was nearly sometime in Georgia, hot and humid during the day, but surprisingly cold at night. We spent most of our time outdoors, doing typical camp activities like canoeing, roasting s'mores, and hiking. One evening, we were given the option to go on a night hike. Oddly enough, my cabin's room was the only group interested, so we set off with a couple of teachers. Halfway through the hike, we were told we were walking through a slave burial ground. All those flat stones we'd been stepping on, they weren't random, they were headstones. We were just kids, and hearing this terrified us. I had always been fascinated by scary stories and the macabre, but this was too much for little me. Some of the girls became visibly uncomfortable and asked if we could turn back. Unfortunately, the teachers told us it would take twice as long to retrace our steps, so we had no choice but to keep moving forward. When we finally got back to our cabin, the mood was tense. Some of the girls were still spooked and asked if we could share bunks or at least leave the lights on. The teachers declined, citing camp rules, so we settled into our separate bunks. I was in a top bunk on the far wall. Once everyone was settled, the teachers came in, turned off the lights, and left us in the dark. About 10 minutes later, one of the girls screamed. I jolted awake and turned toward the sound. That's when I saw it, a tall, dark figure standing in the corner of the room. It was so tall it nearly touched the ceiling. Its eyes glowed a fiery red-orange, and it seemed to be wearing a hat. I stared at it, frozen in disbelief. Around me, the other girls began screaming and crying, clearly seeing the same thing I did. The teachers rushed back in as the first girl, who saw it, bolted out of the room in sheer panic. She hysterically described the figure to them, confirming what the rest of us had seen. The teachers quickly ushered us out of the room so they could investigate. They found nothing, no shadow, no strange objects, no signs of anyone or anything being there. The girl who had screamed first refused to go back into the room. She was so upset they had to call her mother to come and pick her up that night. When the rest of us eventually returned to the cabin and the lights were turned off again, the corner was empty. The figure was gone. In fact, the corner was unusually bright, almost as if nothing had ever been there. Even now, years later, I remember that night vividly. The other girls and I all agree on what we saw.